Mark sat in his small workshop, his eyes glued to the screen of his computer. The hum of machinery filled the room as he fiddled with wires and gadgets. But his mind was elsewhere. He had been working late into the night, trying to perfect his latest invention, a new kind of visor, one that could improve vision for people with damaged eyesight. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't seem to get it right. His fingers tapped the desk impatiently. Mark had always been a curious inventor, but he wasn't used to failing. This was important. He had promised his sister, Anna, that he would find a way to help the blind. But something wasn't working, and he couldn't figure out why. Just then, his computer screen flickered, and a strange series of lights appeared. Mark froze. He hadn't done anything to trigger this. The screen blinked again, and a deep, crackling voice filled the room. "Help! Help me! I can't see! Please! I need your help!" the voice pleaded. Mark's heart raced. He stared at the screen in confusion. This wasn't a normal message. It sounded like a person. No, it was something else. The voice was clear, but the words seemed alien. He quickly typed a response, wondering if this was some sort of prank. "Who is this?" The voice responded instantly, its tone desperate. "I am Zara, from the Zethar system. I am blind. Please, I need your help." Mark blinked. Zara, Zethar system? He had never heard of such a thing. It sounded like something from a sci-fi movie, but he couldn't ignore the panic in her voice. Something about it felt real. He had to respond. His hands trembled as he typed back. "How could I help you?" He wrote, "I need a visor, Zara." Explained, "A special kind of visor. It can help me see again. The ones we have don't work anymore. Only you can help me. I have seen your work. You're the one I need." Mark's mind raced. Visor? His visor? Could it be possible? He had only made prototypes for the human eye. But something about this felt different, urgent. His thoughts shifted. He had to do this. He had to try. "All right, I'll try. But I need more details. How is this visor supposed to work?" The voice on the screen paused. And then Zara's words came slowly, carefully. "You must build it from the materials you have. It must link directly to my mind. It must make me see the way I once did. The Zethar people, we cannot live without it. Without it, we cannot survive." Mark leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. His mind was already running through calculations. Could he build something like that? It would take time, but he was good at what he did. He had built things no one thought were possible. This, though, this was different. This was alien. "I can help you, Zara. But it's going to take time. I need a few days to make this work." The response came faster this time. "Time is not something I have. You must hurry." Mark glanced at the calendar on his desk. It was already late at night. He had just come off a week of non-stop work, but this was different. He couldn't ignore it. This wasn't just another project. This was a real person, or at least it seemed like it. He felt a chill run down his spine as he thought about what he had just committed to. What had he just gotten himself into? He stood up, pacing the small workshop. His eyes flicked to the blueprints for his visor. The designs weren't perfect, but they could work. Maybe. But the idea of connecting his technology to someone's mind, that was a whole different level. The science didn't quite add up. Yet, the plea for help echoed in his mind, pushing him to act. Mark sat back down at his desk, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he started designing a new blueprint, something far more advanced than anything he had ever done before. A visor that could connect with Zara's brain. He was no neuroscientist. But if this worked, it could change everything. It had to work. Minutes turned into hours as he worked. Every click, every line on the screen felt more important than the last. He knew that once he sent the visor to Zara, there was no going back. He wasn't sure what he was getting into, but he had no choice. Zara needed him. Suddenly, his computer screen flashed, and the voice of Zara came through the speakers again. This time even more urgent. "They are coming. The soldiers. They found me. Please hurry." Mark's heart stopped. Soldiers? Who were they? What was going on? Zara continued, "You must hurry. They will kill you for what you are doing. Do not trust them. Trust only me." Mark's hands shook as he typed out a response. "Who are they? Why do they want me?" The voice cracked as Zara replied, They are soldiers from the Empire of Xandar. They want the Visor, and they will stop at nothing to get it. If you complete the Visor, they will come for you. You must finish it before they arrive." Mark's mind spun. He didn't know who these soldiers were, but if they were after this technology, this Visor, things were about to get much worse. He had no time to waste. Mark gathered all his energy, focusing on the task at hand. He couldn't back down now. Not when someone far away, someone from another world was counting on him. He had to finish the Visor. He had to help Zara, and somehow, he had to protect them both. The clock was ticking. Mark barely slept that night. The blueprints for the Visor had consumed his every thought, keeping him awake. He had worked through the early hours, the quiet hum of his tools the only sound in the dark workshop. By morning, he had completed the prototype, a sleek, silver Visor with wires running down the sides, connected to a small neural interface. He couldn't believe he had done it. He'd never worked on anything so advanced, but the voice of Zara echoed in his mind. "They will come for you. Finish it before it's too late." His hands trembled as he packed the Visor carefully in a small case. Mark knew this wasn't just a piece of technology. It was something far bigger, something that could change the course of history. But that also meant it could be dangerous. He wasn't sure how long Zara had been waiting for help, but he knew one thing: time was running out. With a deep breath, Mark hit send on his computer, transmitting the Visor's design to Zara. The screen blinked to life, the same crackling voice filling the room. "It's done," Zara's voice said softly. There was a sense of relief, but also a quiet desperation. "Please, let it work." Mark felt his heart race. As he replied, "It should work. Try it on." The next few seconds felt like hours. Mark sat at his desk, eyes glued to the screen, waiting for any sign of Zara's response. He glanced at the clock. Minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Was it too soon? Was it not enough? He tried not to doubt himself, but the feeling of uncertainty gnawed at him. Then the screen blinked again, and Zara's voice returned, sounding more certain. "It's working. I can see." Mark's breath caught in his throat as he watched her words appear on the screen. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure of what to say next, but Zara spoke before he could. "It's not just sight. I can see everything, the world, the colors, the depth. It's beautiful. Her voice faltered for a moment. "I didn't think I'd ever see again. You've given me something I thought was lost." Mark let out a shaky sigh, the weight of the moment sinking in. He had done it. He had helped her. But just as quickly as the joy of success hit him, a chill ran down his spine. There was no way the Empire of Xandar would let something like this slip through their fingers. They would come for Zara. They would come for the Visor. And then they would come for him. But before he could process that thought further, Zara's voice interrupted his spiraling thoughts. "There's more you need to know," she said, her tone serious now. "The Visor, it's more than just a tool. It's the key to my people's survival. The Zither race, we've been at war for centuries. We've lost everything. The Visor connects us to our history, to our memories, and to our future. It's the only thing that can save us." Mark's mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. He had created a piece of technology far beyond anything he could have imagined. But the way Zara spoke about it made it clear. This wasn't just a tool. It was a symbol of something far more dangerous, far more powerful. The Empire of Xandar is relentless. They want the Visor. They want its power. If they get it, they will wipe out my people. Zara's voice grew tense. "And now that they know you have built it, they will stop at nothing to take it from you." Mark stood up from his desk, pacing nervously. The walls of his small workshop seemed to close in on him as he thought about what Zara had said. He had helped her, yes, but now he was caught in the middle of something bigger than he had ever imagined. "Where are you, Zara?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "I'm hiding," she replied, her voice tinged with fear. "I don't know for how long. The Empire has eyes everywhere. They will track you too. They'll come for you. They'll destroy you for what you've done." Mark's heart pounded in his chest. The weight of Zara's words hit him like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about a simple invention anymore. It was about survival, about protecting Zara and her people. and keeping the visor out of the hands of those who would use it for destruction. But as he stood there, frozen in place, his computer beeped. A new message flashed across the screen. "They're here," Zara whispered, panic rising in her voice. "They've found me. They're coming for you. You need to hide. You need to get out now." Mark's blood ran cold. He could feel the heat rising in his chest, his palms sweating as his mind raced. How had they found her so quickly? What could he do to help her now? "Zara," he called out, his voice cracking. "Where are you? How can I help you?" But there was no answer. A loud bang echoed from outside his workshop. Mark's heart skipped a beat as he rushed to the window. In the distance, he saw them, black-suited soldiers, their faces hidden behind dark helmets. Storming through the streets, they were headed straight for his building. Panic flooded Mark's mind as he grabbed the visor, tucking it into a small bag. He knew it was time to run, but where? The soldiers were everywhere, and Zara's voice echoed in his mind. "They will come for you. They will kill you for this." Mark made his decision. He would protect Zara, no matter the cost. The fight for survival had only just begun. As the first soldier pounded on his door, Mark grabbed his things and ran. The door slammed open with a force that shook the entire room. Mark barely had time to react as the black-suited soldiers flooded into his workshop, their heavy boots pounding against the floor. He grabbed the bag containing the visor, his heart racing, and darted toward the back exit. The soldiers shouted commands, but Mark didn't stop. He bolted through the narrow hallway, his footsteps echoing in the silence, the sound of heavy breathing filling his ears. His mind was a blur, racing through every possible escape route. But the truth was clear. There was nowhere to hide. Not from them, not from the Empire of Xandar. As he reached the back door, Mark swung it open and ran into the alley. His pulse pounded in his neck, his legs burning with every stride. The visor was his only hope, and he couldn't let it fall into their hands. Not now, not ever. The alley stretched out before him like an endless tunnel. It was dark, narrow, and filled with garbage bins and forgotten objects, but Mark didn't care. He kept running, ignoring the way his body screamed for him to stop. Every step was a battle, his mind consumed with fear, but also with determination. He would protect Zara. He had no choice, but just as he thought he might escape, the harsh sound of engines broke the stillness. The soldiers were already in pursuit, their vehicles roaring to life. Mark's heart sank as he heard the screech of tires turning the corner. He didn't have much time. In that moment, Zara's voice crackled through his earpiece, making him flinch. "Mark, you have to keep moving. They're tracking you. You can't stop." He couldn't stop, not for a second. But where could he go? He didn't have the resources to fight an army, and he was running out of options. He couldn't lead the soldiers to Zara, but how could he escape them and keep her safe? "Where do I go?" Mark gasped, his breath ragged, his eyes darting around. Zara's voice softened, like she was trying to comfort him. "There's a safe house, a place where the resistance is hiding. I'll guide you, but you have to be quick. They are getting closer." Mark nodded, even though she couldn't see him. He didn't have time to waste. With Zara's directions in his ear, he took a sharp left, moving deeper into the maze of narrow streets. The sound of the soldiers' vehicles grew louder, closing in on him with terrifying speed. He turned down another alley, hoping it would lead him somewhere he could hide. But as he rounded the corner, he collided with something, or rather, someone. Mark stumbled backward, almost falling, but he caught himself just in time. Before him stood a woman, dressed in dark clothes, her eyes hidden behind a pair of sleek, black goggles. Her face was hardened, her expression unreadable, and the air around her seemed to crackle with energy. "You're the human who built the visor," she said, her voice low, almost like a growl. "Zara is important, but she's not the only one who needs it." Mark's chest tightened. "Who are you?" The woman didn't answer immediately. She glanced behind him, where the sound of the soldiers grew even closer. "There's no time to explain," she said. "If you're going to survive, you have to trust me." Mark opened his mouth to protest, but the sound of distant engines roared louder, followed by the shouts of soldiers closing in on them. "Do you trust me or not?" she snapped. grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the shadows. "We're out of time." Mark hesitated, but with no better choice, he followed. They sprinted down another alley, the woman leading him through narrow gaps and hidden pathways that Mark had never noticed before. They moved like shadows, their footsteps silent against the ground. But Mark couldn't shake the feeling that he was being led into something much larger than he had signed up for. Who was this woman? What did she mean about Zara not being the only one who needed the visor? And why was the resistance involved? His mind was spinning, but he couldn't afford to ask questions now. The soldiers were getting closer, and Zara's warning echoed in his mind. "You can't trust anyone, not even those who claim to help." "Where are we going?" Mark asked, breathless, his voice barely a whisper. "Follow me and stay quiet." The woman replied, her voice firm. "We're taking you to the Resistance's underground base. It's the only place you'll be safe, at least for now." They finally reached a hidden door at the end of a dead-end alley. The woman pressed her hand against a small, unmarked panel, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. "Go inside," she instructed, shoving him forward. Mark stepped into the dimly lit room, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. The door closed behind him with a soft click, sealing them in. He was inside, safe for now, but the feeling of uncertainty gnawed at him. He could hear voices from deeper inside the underground facility, but they weren't speaking in any language Mark recognized. He glanced back at the woman who had helped him. "You still haven't told me who you are," Mark said, his voice low, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. The woman's lips curled into a faint smile. "Names are irrelevant. What matters now is survival, and getting that visor into the right hands before the Empire finds us." Before Mark could respond, another voice, rough and authoritative, called out from the darkness, "Who's the human?" The woman turned toward the sound, her posture stiffening. "He's the one who built it. The visor. Zara's last hope." Mark's heart skipped a beat. Zara, the Empire was closer than he thought. He had to protect the visor, but the Resistance, could they really help him? Would they help him protect Zara? Or was he walking into an even bigger trap? He had no answers, but he couldn't turn back now. As he stood there, still catching his breath, the door to the underground base slid open once more. A group of soldiers stepped inside this time. They weren't wearing black uniforms. They were civilians, people who had seen war, people who had fought the Empire for years. But one thing was certain: Mark had just stepped into a much bigger conflict than he had ever imagined. The underground base was quiet, too quiet. Mark could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears, the echo of his footsteps on the concrete floor almost deafening. He followed the woman through the narrow hallways, the dim light flickering above them. The air was thick with tension, and Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The woman, who had introduced herself simply as Kira, led him to a small, unmarked door at the end of the corridor. She knocked twice before entering, and Mark followed her into the room, which was filled with scattered maps, flickering holographic screens, and crates filled with supplies. It looked like a war room, but there was no time to study it. "Sit," Kira ordered, pointing to a worn chair at the table in the center of the room. Mark hesitated, but sat down, keeping the bag with the visor close to his chest. It felt like the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. As Kira walked to one of the screens, she spoke in a low voice. "We've been tracking the Empire's movements for years, but we weren't prepared for this. They're closing in on us faster than expected. They know you have the visor." Mark's stomach twisted. "I don't know how they found me." "I doesn't matter," Kira interrupted. "What matters is how we stop them, and right now, the only way is to make sure the visor never falls into their hands. If they get it, Zara will be the last of her kind." Mark swallowed hard. The weight of Kira's words pressed down on him. He wasn't just running for his life anymore, he was running to protect an entire race. But the Resistance's plan didn't feel like the right path. Something was off suddenly. The silence was broken by a distant rumble, a loud, ominous thud that shook the walls. Mark's heart jumped into his throat as Kira's eyes darted toward the door. "They've found us," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "We don't have much time." Before Mark could respond, the door to the room burst open. 3 soldiers, dressed in the same black uniforms that Mark had seen earlier, stormed in. They moved with military precision, their eyes scanning the room for any sign of resistance. Kira was already moving, her hand darting to a hidden compartment in the wall. In the blink of an eye, she pulled out a small blaster, leveling it at the soldiers. "Stay behind me," she ordered, her voice sharp and commanding. Mark froze for a moment, his instinct screaming at him to run, but Kira was already stepping forward. The blaster aimed at the intruders. The soldiers didn't flinch. Instead, they smirked, as if they had expected this confrontation. "You're making a mistake, Kira," one of the soldiers said, his voice cold and full of menace. "This human and the visor are ours. You've been warned." Kira's eyes narrowed. "You think you can take us down that easily?" she shot back, her tone laced with defiance. "The visor is the last piece of technology that can turn the tide of this war. If you want it, you'll have to go through me." The soldier stepped forward, his fingers twitching toward his own weapon. But before he could draw it, there was a sudden, deafening crack, a loud, sharp noise that sent a shockwave through the room. Mark instinctively ducked, his heart hammering in his chest. The soldiers flinched, their weapons now trained on the door. From the darkness beyond the door, a new figure appeared. A towering figure, dressed in sleek black armor, with a helmet that gleamed in the dim light. This wasn't just another soldier, it was a leader, a general, by the looks of him. "I think we've had enough of this little game, Kira," the general said, his voice deep and resonant. His helmet reflected the light, hiding any sign of emotion. "You've been a thorn in our side for too long." Mark's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen someone so intimidating, so powerful. This was the person behind the Empire's army, the one who would stop at nothing to capture Zara and the visor, the leader of the elite soldiers. "You're not getting the visor," Kira snarled, her grip tightening on the blaster. "Not without a fight," the general chuckled, his voice laced with arrogance. "A fight? You're already dead, Kira. You just don't know it yet." He raised his hand, signaling the soldiers to advance. They moved in sync, their weapons raised, but Kira didn't back down. She fired first, the blast lighting up the room like a flash of lightning. The soldier closest to her staggered back, a scorch mark on his chest, but he didn't fall. Instead, he returned fire, forcing Kira to duck behind a crate for cover. Mark watched in stunned silence. He didn't know what to do. The blaster fire was so fast, so precise, it was like they had been trained for this moment. Kira wasn't going to survive this alone. But then, as the general advanced, Mark saw something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition. The general's gaze shifted toward Mark, and for a moment, their eyes locked. The general's lips curled into a cold, knowing smile. "I know who you are," the general said, his voice quieter now. "You're the one who built it, the visor, the human who thinks he can change the war." Mark's heart skipped a beat. How did he know? How could he possibly know? "Take him," the general ordered, his voice now tinged with malice. "We'll make sure he watches as we finish this." Before Mark could react, one of the soldiers grabbed him by the arm, pulling him toward the door. Kira's voice rang out as she fired another shot, but it was too late. Mark was dragged out of the room, his legs stumbling beneath him as he tried to fight back. "You'll regret this," Kira shouted from behind, but her words were drowned out by the sound of the door slamming shut. Mark was thrown into a dark, cold hallway, the grip on his arm tightening. The general's voice echoed in his mind. "You're the one who built it. You're the one who thinks you can change the war." And now Mark realized with a sickening dread, he was about to become part of that war. Mark's heart hammered in his chest as the soldier's grip tightened around his arm. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding around him. They had him now. They had Zara's only hope, the visor, and it seemed like there was no way out. But something inside him refused to give up. Not when so many lives were at stake. As they dragged him down the narrow, dimly lit corridor, Mark's eyes flicked from side to side, desperately searching for a way out. He had no weapons, no tools, nothing but his wits. And yet, he knew that, without the visor, without Zara, they were all doomed. The soldiers weren't rough with him, But their silence spoke volumes. They weren't going to kill him immediately. No, they wanted something more. They wanted the visor, and they wanted him to hand it over willingly. But Mark wasn't going to give up that easily. When they finally reached the end of the hallway, the lead soldier opened a heavy steel door, revealing a dimly lit room filled with high-tech equipment. The general was there, standing near a large control panel, watching Mark's every move. The cold, emotionless gaze of the general met Mark's eyes again, sending a shiver down his spine. Well, the inventor himself. The general said with a cruel smile, "I have to admit, I didn't expect you to be so resourceful. But now that we have the visor, the war is over. Your people don't stand a chance." Mark clenched his fists at his sides. The war isn't over, he thought. Not yet. Where is Zara? Mark demanded, his voice shaky but firm. He knew the general had no intention of answering, but he needed to buy himself time. Time for what, though? The general's eyes flickered with amusement, but he didn't answer. Instead, he turned to one of the soldiers, nodding slightly. The soldier moved to a nearby table and placed the small case containing the visor on it. Opening it carefully, the light from the room reflected off the smooth surface of the visor, casting a soft glow. Mark's stomach churned. That simple piece of technology was all they needed to wipe out an entire race. The Zethar people were counting on him, and if he failed now, he would have no way to live with himself. Suddenly, the general spoke again, his voice calm and calculating. "You know, Mark, I didn't bring you here just to gloat. I brought you here because you're important. You can help us. You can make the visor even stronger, more powerful. Imagine what it could do if you worked with us." Mark's jaw tightened. The last thing he wanted was to help the Empire. He wouldn't be part of their conquest. He had already made his decision when he built the visor to protect Zara, to protect the Zethar people. "I'm not helping you," Mark spat, his voice defiant. "I'd rather die than give you that power." The general chuckled softly, stepping closer to Mark. "Brave words, but I've seen men break. It's only a matter of time before you realize that we're your only option." Before Mark could respond, the door to the room swung open with a bang, and a new voice interrupted the tension. "General." The room fell silent as a figure stepped into the doorway, their silhouette casting a shadow in the dim light. Mark's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't another soldier. This was someone else, someone different. The figure was tall, their movements fluid, almost inhuman. They wore a long cloak that billowed behind them, the edges glinting with strange symbols. Mark couldn't quite place their species, but their eyes, bright, glowing, and filled with intensity, were unmistakable. They were alien, and yet they radiated power. "Who are you?" Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. The figure stepped forward, their eyes meeting his. "I'm not your enemy," they said in a calm, soothing voice. "I'm here to help." The general narrowed his eyes, but he didn't speak. Instead, he seemed to study the new rival for a long moment. Then, with a slight nod, he gestured to the soldiers. "Leave us." The soldiers hesitated for only a second before complying, leaving the room in silence. The figure turned to Mark, their gaze intense, but not threatening. "You're Mark, the inventor who created the visor for Zara," the figure said. "You're the one who can change the course of this war." Mark shook his head. "I don't know how. I'm just trying to protect her, protect my people." The figure studied him for a moment before speaking again. "You don't need to protect her, Mark. You need to protect the visor. It holds the key to everything, but you cannot do it alone. You need someone who knows how to control it, someone who understands its power." Mark frowned. "And who might that be?" The figure's glowing eyes flickered, almost as if they were reading him. "I've been watching you, watching all of you. The Empire thinks they can control the visor, but they don't understand it. You and Zara are the ones who can unlock its true potential. Together." Mark's mind was reeling. What was this alien talking about? Unlock the visor's true potential? How could Zara and he, a human, have control over something so powerful before? He could ask more. The figure's gaze softened. "You're not alone, Mark. The Resistance isn't the only ally you have. I've been sent to offer you help, but you have to decide right now. You can join me and we can fight back, or you can remain here and the Empire will take everything you've worked for. Mark's mind raced. The Resistance had been helping him. But this alien, this mysterious figure offered something different. Something more. I can't do this alone, Mark admitted, his voice filled with a mix of fear and determination. I need help. The figure nodded. Then, together, we will take down the Empire. But remember this, Mark, time is running out. They're coming for you. For Zara, and for the Visor. We must act, or it will be too late. With that, the figure stepped forward, extending their hand to Mark. For the first time since everything had started, Mark didn't feel so alone. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one who could change the outcome of this war. He reached out and took the figure's hand. I'm in, Mark said. And for the first time, he truly felt like he had a chance to win. The underground base was eerily quiet as Mark followed the mysterious figure. Through a series of narrow, winding hallways, the air felt thick with tension, every step echoing like a countdown to something inevitable. Kira and the rest of the Resistance had gathered in a hidden chamber deep within the base, preparing for what they all knew would be the final stand against the Empire of Xandar. It was the last chance to stop the relentless soldiers and keep the Visor from falling into their hands. Mark's thoughts raced as he walked, his fingers nervously tapping the small case containing the Visor, now secured tightly under his arm. The weight of it felt heavier than ever. It wasn't just a piece of technology, it was a weapon that could end the war. But in the wrong hands, it could destroy everything. He had seen how desperate the Empire was to get their hands on it. They would stop at nothing. The figure who had arrived to help, who had only introduced themselves as Elir, now stood ahead of him, their cloak trailing behind them like some otherworldly shadow. Elir's glowing eyes reflected the dim, flickering lights of the base, their expression unreadable but determined. Are you ready? Elir asked, their voice calm and reassuring, though Mark could sense the urgency in their tone. Mark nodded, though a knot of doubt tightened in his stomach. Ready? He wasn't sure anyone could ever be ready for what was about to unfold. The Resistance was outnumbered. They didn't have the firepower of the Empire, but they had one thing. The Empire didn't: hope. And Mark had to believe that hope was enough. We have to make this count, Mark said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. Once we engage, there's no turning back. Elir gave a brief nod, their eyes scanning the room ahead. The Resistance had set up a command center in a hidden chamber, maps and holographic screens flashing with intel. They had a plan, a strategy. But even with all the preparation, Mark knew it would come down to how fast they moved, how well they adapted. They would have only one shot. We don't have the luxury of time, Elir murmured. The Empire is already mobilizing their forces. They won't stop until they have what they want. Mark swallowed hard, tightening his grip on the Visor. I can't let them get their hands on it. Elir stepped closer, their gaze intense. You won't be alone in this. Trust the Resistance. Trust Zara. The mention of Zara brought a wave of guilt over Mark. He hadn't heard from her in hours. Was she safe? Was she even alive? He pushed the thoughts aside. There was no time to wonder. The only thing he could do now was fight. Fight for her. Fight for the Visor. Fight for the survival of a people he barely understood, but knew were worth saving. As they entered the command center, Kira and the others looked up. Kira's sharp eyes took in Mark's appearance, and without a word, she handed him a sleek, lightweight weapon. It wasn't much, just a small blaster, but it was better than nothing. You're not just holding the Visor, Mark, Kira said, her voice low. You're holding our future. Don't let the Empire take it. Mark took the weapon with a nod. The weight of it felt both reassuring and terrifying. He had never been in a battle like this, but he wasn't going to back down now. He couldn't. The air in the room grew heavier as the Resistance's plan was laid out. Their mission was simple: infiltrate the Empire's command post, destroy their communications, and most importantly, keep the Visor out of their hands. The fight would be brutal, and it would be quick. They didn't have the luxury of drawn-out battles. The Empire would be on them before they even knew what hit them. Mark's heart thudded in his chest as he listened to the details. The Empire's forces were already closing in, their fleet of ships hovering overhead. The Resistance had to move fast. Are you ready? Kira asked, her voice strong, but filled with the quiet anxiety of someone who knew what was at stake. Mark's gaze flicked from one face to another. There was fear in their eyes, but there was something else too, determination, a kind of unity that Mark had never seen before. He nodded. I'm ready. The room fell into a tense silence. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped moving. But then, without another word, Kira led the way to the exit. The sound of boots hitting the cold floor was the only noise. As they made their way to the surface, the outside world was bathed in an eerie orange glow as the Empire's ships hovered overhead. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the threat of what was to come. Mark's eyes scanned the horizon, his mind racing. They had to move fast. They had to take control before the Empire could strike. As they neared the outskirts of the Resistance's hideout, the first explosions rang out. The Empire had begun their assault. The battle had begun. Mark's pulse quickened as he sprinted toward the entrance of the compound. The visor still tightly clutched in his hand. The air around him crackled with energy. The sound of gunfire and explosions in the distance. This was it. There was no going back now. Elir was already ahead, moving with purpose, their cloak flowing like a shadow. Mark's thoughts drifted to Zara. Please be safe, he thought, gripping the visor tighter. Please let this work. The Resistance was ready for this. They had trained for it. They had planned for it. But there was still a chance, just a small one, that the Empire could win. And that thought haunted Mark as they stepped into the heart of the battlefield, knowing that every decision from this moment on could be the difference between life and death. The first blast from the Empire's ships shook the ground beneath them, sending Mark stumbling forward. The battle was far from over. It had only just begun. The chaos of battle raged on, the deafening sounds of explosions and gunfire mixing with the crackle of distant energy blasts. Mark's pulse surged in his veins, and his breath came in short gasps as he sprinted alongside Kira and Elir, the cold wind whipping around them. The underground Resistance base had been obliterated in moments, and now they were in the heart of the enemy's territory, surrounded by Empire soldiers, with nothing but their wits, the visor, and their determination to keep fighting. Mark's fingers tightened around the small case holding the visor, his heart pounding in his chest. This is the moment, he thought, every step he took feeling like it would be his last. The war had come down to this single point. The visor was humanity's last chance. And it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about defiance, about proving that no matter how far the Empire pushed, there was always something worth fighting for. A massive explosion rocked the ground just ahead of them, sending a wall of dust and debris cascading toward them. Mark stumbled but regained his footing, only to see Kira and Elir already moving ahead. Their eyes locked on a distant building, a sleek black structure guarded by a dozen armed soldiers. That's their main control center, Kira shouted. Over the noise, her face determined but grim. We need to get inside. If we can disable their communications, the Empire won't be able to coordinate their forces. It'll buy us enough time to stop them from launching an all-out assault. Mark's eyes followed her gaze. The building was towering, imposing, its windows lined with high-tech surveillance equipment, its walls reinforced with armor that could withstand even the fiercest of attacks. It seemed impossible to breach, but then he remembered why they were there. The visor, he thought, the key to everything, the reason they had fought through the chaos to reach this point. I'll get to the central console, Mark said, his voice more certain than he felt. I can disable the communication systems. You and Elir, cover me. Kira's eyes softened for a moment, but her resolve didn't waver. If we fail here, everything ends. If we don't make it, at least make sure the visor doesn't fall into their hands. Mark nodded sharply. He understood. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about sacrificing everything for a chance at something better. With a deep breath, he pulled the visor out of its case and strapped it securely to his head. For a second, everything went quiet. The world around him blurred, the sounds of the battlefield dimming as the visor's neural interface linked with his mind. Mark felt a rush of information flood his brain. He could see the enemy's movements, their heat signatures, their weapons, their weaknesses. The visor wasn't just a tool to restore vision. It was a weapon of perception, a gift from Zaras. People, a gift he had no choice but to use. Now, Mark whispered to himself, taking one last look at Kira and Elir. Now, we fight. They charged forward. And in the chaos of battle, Mark's vision became sharper, clearer. He saw everything. The soldiers scrambling to reload, the pathways leading to their control center, the soft hum of electrical wires, and the weakness in the building's defense grid. Every movement, every decision became an instinct, as if the visor was guiding him, urging him on. He reached the control center's outer walls, his hands flying over a series of keypads and wires. The guards didn't see him until it was too late. He disabled the first security layer with ease, his mind now in perfect sync with the technology. But as he reached for the final key to breach the control system, a sharp, unmistakable voice echoed from behind him. "You really think you can stop me, human?" The general, his deep, commanding voice sent a chill down Mark's spine as he turned slowly, seeing the tall, imposing figure emerge from the shadows, flanked by two soldiers. Mark's grip on the visor tightened, but he didn't flinch. "I don't think. I know." The general's helmet glinted in the dim light, his eyes filled with a cold, calculating fury. "You've interfered for the last time. This is where it ends for you." Mark stepped forward, the visor locking onto the general's movements. "Maybe for you, but for the rest of us, it's just beginning." With a swift motion, Mark activated the control panel. The building's communications network flickered as the system began to collapse, lights flashing and alarms blaring. The general's eyes widened in shock, but before he could react, the building's power grid collapsed entirely, plunging them into darkness. The soldiers staggered, disoriented, but Mark moved swiftly, his every action precise. He reached out and grabbed the small explosive device that had been wired into the console, tossing it across the room just as General lunged for him. "Now, Kira," Mark shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. The explosion detonated, sending a shockwave through the control room. Mark was thrown to the ground, his body aching from the impact, but the general's advancing footsteps stopped. The power had been disabled. The Empire's communications were offline. They had a chance. Through the smoke and debris, Mark saw Kira and Elir running toward him. Their faces were bruised, their bodies covered in dust, but there was a fire in their eyes. They had made it. They had fought for this moment. "We did it," Kira said, her voice hoarse but filled with relief. "We've taken their command center. The Empire won't be able to coordinate their forces." Mark nodded, his body trembling with exhaustion, but his mind was alive with adrenaline. He couldn't believe it. They had done it. They had actually done it. As the battle continued to rage outside, Mark felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Elir, their glowing eyes focused on him with intensity. "This is just the beginning. Mark, the Empire is powerful, but they are not invincible. Now, the fight truly begins." Mark looked around at the rubble, at the resistance standing tall, despite the odds, at the visor that had led him to this moment. He had no more doubts. This wasn't the end. It was the spark of something bigger, something better, and in that moment, Mark realized that no matter how dark the road ahead might be, they had already won the most important battle. They had proven that hope, when combined with courage and unity, could stand against even the greatest of powers. It was a new beginning,